Hey everybody, so we got Tim Dillon on JRE. As usual, he brings it. He's good, he's funny. Thought it was a good episode. I cut out all the really good, interesting parts for you. And of course, at the very end, Joe has to go ahead and spoil it by just saying something, something stupid. I can't stand his perspective on this particular issue, but at any rate, it was at the end of the episode anyway, but that's where it is in this video.
Institutions is they will sit you down for an hour and then I guess cherry pick what they think their audience wants to see.
Well, they just want what they think is going to grab the most ratings and is not going to make them look stupid.
Well, they want to control the narrative. So that is what is known as propaganda. We're officially there now, and I think many people have woken up to this fact. There's still some who are clinging to the idea, the notion that our media institutions have our best interest at heart and in mind, and they don't. But it's very, very welcoming to see that more and more people are waking up to this.
She said that she goes, comedy's right wing. No, I go, she goes, name left of center comedians. I named literally 8 of them, and I said they all are in arenas. I go, what are you talking about?
It's so dumb.
What are you talking about?
It's so dumb.
I was like, that's you're saying that comedy's what?
By the way, I used to be left of center according to the metrics of 2015.
I said there's a lot of Joe's positions, if you look at them, that are left of center positions. And there's a lot of my positions or anyone's positions. I said there's nobody that you can easily put in a box.
Yeah.
But they want you to be in that box.
And that is another problem, is that the Overton window has been grabbed by the extremes of the country, the far left, the far right, and they've just distorted things. So anybody who's centrist, they do their best, as Tim's about to say, to put them in a box, into a simple binary so that they can continue the narrative that it's one side of the country versus another, when that's not true at all. Things are very complicated and gray. There's a zillion shades of gray to most subjects. And so anyway, it's a part of simplifying the narrative. It's a part of idiocracy. And it's great to hear them talking about it.
Be an enemy of CNN. I don't give a fuck if
you don't care. Who cares?
By the way, I hope CNN corrects course and does real news.
Right.
And just concentrates on the news and all this fucking... I don't want editorial comments from morons, right? So when you're force-feeding me Don Lemon's opinion on how the world should be,
right,
and how everyone should be shamed if they don't get vaccinated, like, you're force-feeding me morons. Like, no matter... Of course your ratings plummeted. Of course. And you guys lied about so many fucking things and never corrected yourself.
This is terrifying, though, that it seems like a third of the country is awake and aware to what's happening, to these lies, to the bullshit that's happening. There's a third that is pretty much asleep, cozying up to whatever media reinforces their own worldview, and they're just becoming a little foot soldier to that organization. That's disturbing. Then the other third, I think, is still indifferent. I think they're still kind of quietly observing or just living their life, and are the non-voters, the people who don't even get involved in this because they're too busy raising a family, trying to get through. And so, yeah, it's messed.
Is there an arm of the Democratic National Committee? And they're an arm of that party. I mean,
whether they are forced to be or whether they choose to be because they identify with being Democrat and they want to skew things completely towards the left. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
All of the old Bush era neoconservative people who pushed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the Patriot Act and Guantanamo Bay and all of this stuff all find homes usually on MSNBC or CNN advocating for war with Iran or an escalation in Ukraine. They always, so it's kind of an establishment, doesn't seem to matter. They don't really care about party.
Right.
And, you know.
They're doing better now, though. I mean, this when they have Scott Jennings on.
He's
he's great. Yeah. That's the kind of conversations you need. Completely ridiculous people who are out of their fucking minds versus Scott Jennings. Like, those are great.
You need to have some fun,
It makes these ridiculous woke anchors look retarded.
Yeah.
And they should.
There are good principled arguments that against right-wing things.
Yes.
You just can't have people who are completely out of it make them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. After the election, one of my favorite ones, was it CNBC or CNN? I forget what it was. This guy was talking about this whole right-wing podcast ecosystem that's incredibly well-funded and organized. And what are you talking about? Like, you could literally go to the roots of how it all started. You could see every one of us doing our first podcast with a fucking webcam.
There's no funding. What are we talking about? What are we saying?
Even the
Funding.
idea that we're all organized together, or that like I would want to prevent people from going on CNN.
Well, it's just silly.
It's not care less.
Because that's the way they operate. You always usually, like, a lot of times you end up accusing people of something you're doing.
Right.
So because you are familiar with that. So they're like, well, we have a top-down corporate oligarchy telling us what to do. Is that the way it works with you? Like, no, Joe Rogan doesn't email people at the beginning of the week and go, hey, guys, this is
where you can't go.
This is the most insane thing ever.
That is such a good point. I mean, this is kind of like the left hemispheric way of thinking of the world, that it's top-down, it's hierarchical, and, well, I'm a robot, therefore you must be a robot too. So there's this very interesting phenomenon of the other person's psychology basically they're outing their own way of thinking by accusing other people of doing what they're doing. So it's basic projection. And it's amazing to see that this is how they operate. They probably always have operated. But as the world wakes up, it becomes more and more painfully obvious.
Well, not only that, like, I want them to do well. I really don't care. They
Right.
obviously don't want me to do well,
Right.
but I don't care. I
Right.
hope look, if they turned it around and CNN became great, I'd watch it all the time. It used to be great. It used to have parts unknown on it.
The new thing they're doing, this is a very interesting thing that's happening. If somebody says something that they don't like and they can't immediately dismiss it, they go, but the fans of that thing are bad people.
Right.
This is an interesting attack point. They go, but somebody with a massive audience, if they find a sliver of that audience to
Right.
be objectionable in any way, they then go, well, the fans of that type of questioning are anti-Semitic or racist
Right.
or something.
Well,
and they
that's-
don't deal with the actual facts or the actual line of argumentation.
And isn't that interesting? The fans of something or someone have an opinion, have sort of a voice that is not really approved of by some sort of mainstream publication. That's a problem. That's just populism. That's just people rising up and saying a thing. And there happens to be enough people saying the same thing that goes counter to the narrative. So that's pretty telling, again, and pretty disgusting how they're trying to weaponize people's free speech against them and use the narrative that, like, oh, no, this is a problem. They're becoming radicalized. No, they're just against
Yeah,
you.
it's just a sneaky debate tactic.
Right.
When you're dealing with, I have 19 million YouTube subscribers. How can you nail that down to the fans?
Right.
You don't know. You're
Right.
just talking out of your ass. This is a non-argument. It's a
Right.
stupid point. And by the way, when you're talking about actual comments, we've already established that, I don't know what the number is, but there's a huge number of people that are commenting that aren't even people. They're
Right.
bots.
And that's really disturbing too. The whole dead internet theory concept that there's just more and more bots than there are real people. I hate the idea of having an internet ID to verify whether you're human or not. But regardless, we would probably benefit from in the future knowing who's real and who's not. As much as that is an authoritarian move, it's hard to argue against. More and more, it just seems like the conversation is being polluted and manipulated. And I think we deserve knowing who's real and who's not.
Because the fundamentalist Christians go hard
Yeah.
with the Israel thing. They're
Yeah,
like,
'cause
let's
they think
go.
Jesus is coming back to
No,
that spot.
yeah. What's very interesting is if Israel said to a fundamentalist Christian, if Netanyahu called Mike Huckabee and said, we're going to have to nuke Iran, he'd go, let's do it.
That's what Jesus
Let's
wants.
do it. That's what Jesus would want, a nuclear war. So that's where we've gotten. We've gotten to the
Jesus
point
wants us to use the nukes.
where we have fundamentalist Christians and fundamentalist Israelis and fundamentalist Muslims on the other side, and everybody's playing this weird game.
It is true. It's fundamentalism down to the core of, regardless of what tribe it is, Christianity, Muslim, Hinduism, whatever. It's like if you're listening to a country that wants to use war to solve its problems, wants to use atomic weapons, and especially those who are saying that they're also Christian, like, shut up and leave the room. This is disgusting. And that's why I think there is a rise of anti-Christians, or they're definitely non-Christians, people who say they're Christian, but then the next breath they're advocating for nuclear war. It's disgusting. And also, it's a term, accelerationism, I believe. It's like, oh, we got to speed up the end times so that Christ returns. I mean, that's sick. That's perverted. And that's almost like an invasion of an ideology that a suicide cult would have. And we're seeing it in fundamentalism within Christianity. scary.
This is not. I think people got to separate like governments from people, intelligence agencies from people. I think that's the whole thing. I think people are losing the ability to do that in this case, right? Because people, when you criticize Israel, or you criticize something that may or may not have been done by a government or an intelligence agency, you're not criticizing people.
Right.
You're criticizing a group of people making decisions. I don't think America always does things that are in the best interest of the American people.
Right.
True. This is a great point, actually, that Tim brings up. The idea that like individuals and groups of people and countries are not the same thing. So an individual can say something and be of a particular race. They don't represent that entire race. And if there's a race that is primarily of a certain country, well, that race doesn't necessarily represent the country, because look at America. Look at the country of America. We have all these different groups, racial groups, but we also have, I mean, in our politics, it's divided right down the center. It's liberal and conservative. And so nobody from the outside can say that there is a univoice within the country. There is no one voice, even though the Republicans are in power right now. That doesn't mean that everybody believes what Donald Trump says or what a conservative representative says. And the problem is that the country being divided right down the middle, and we have less and less unity, and we have less support behind what our representatives are saying, because our representatives are insane, and they are are not really working in the best interest of people, of their citizens. We are seeing this tribalization increase, and there's a desire for that to increase, because then you can have a civil war, and then you can like lock down the country in martial law and completely control everybody. And that seems to be what one of the potential end games is. And when you see it kind of happening, when these little levers are being pulled, the strings being pulled, trying to manipulate people into falling into different groups, again, this is dark. This is evil.
Well, this is the problem with when everybody sort of picks sides during the COVID thing, whether or not we should trust the vaccine companies. Because, like, you did it because you're on the left and the people on the right were the ones who didn't want to take it. So instead of just looking at it objectively, the people on the left were like, everybody who doesn't agree is a science denier, and it got like really kooky because it got ideological. And as soon as it's ideological, you can fucking justify anything. This is how Jewish Americans are justifying, well, Hamas uses people as human shields. Like, they'll say things like that. Like, it's a way you can justify mass murder. Yeah. It's a way you can justify anything. As long as the tribe on your side, whatever your clan is, you can justify things. And so people stop thinking. They stop thinking, and they just think completely along ideological lines. It's frustrating as fuck.
It is. And passionately. Yeah. Very passionately.
Oh, they're right. You're
wrong.
No
one is ever questioning anything.
No one ever questions science.
No one goes, wait a minute. Like, I think it's healthy to every now and then go, maybe I'm wrong.
Or every single human being, myself included, we all need to stop and ask ourselves, am I wrong? Like, what does the other side say? What does somebody else from a different perspective say? What do they see? What is their reality like? And just have an open mind of like, I might be wrong, but actually I, according to another perspective, am wrong. So what did they see? What do they see that I don't? And having sort of this omni-perspectival approach to things, you can see things from many different perspectives. That way you're not owned by any particular ideology. And again, it's terrifying, especially since COVID, this just creep into groupthink. And I mean, everybody, more and more people see this, and more people are aware of it. At the same time, it feels like the people who are locked down intellectually, I mean, they're kind of gone. They will repeat whatever the news says, even when the news or the group that they follow, their tribe, switches the narrative, and those people switch their own narrative. And so there's this cognitive dissonance. That is exactly when you know they are captured and nobody's actually home.
As it's been explained to me by pretty smart people, that's what you have. You have a rogue element of people in those agencies that have massive amounts of money.
Right.
And they're very well connected, and they're running weapons, And the president has no idea what's going on.
Right.
And Congress has no idea what's going on. They're not briefing a teacher from Georgia who got elected because he promised he was going to build a fucking shopping mall in a suburb of Atlanta about what they're doing in Syria.
Right.
They're not briefing these people.
Exactly.
There's nothing democratic about what's happening. And so then you think to yourself, you're like, well, how do we make sure everyone keeps their mouth shut? How do we make sure everyone keeps their mouth shut?
Cha-ching.
Then we go, not only money, but that's when we bring in Ghislaine Maxwell. That's when we bring in Jeffrey Epstein, right? That's when we bring in people who go, let's all have fun. We've got a great weekend getaway planned. And then we can all be on camera doing something that would get us thrown in jail, have people rightly disgusted and want to kill us. And the worst things ever are now on camera somewhere. Those tapes are somewhere. Now everybody is completely incapable of ever coming out and saying what's going on.
Now, this is a bit of a conspiracy rabbit hole. I love thinking about this, but I wonder, I mean, we've seen examples of people stepping out and blowing the whistle, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and so on. But I wonder, and there's this recent whistleblower at Facebook, but I wonder if we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on, because as things increase in intensity, there's going to be more and more internal pressure from people within who actually have a conscience and see what's going on and how demonic things are becoming. They're going to feel this pressure to speak up. And I'm confident that we're going to see more and more people. And honestly, it takes one person to create such an impact in our world by saying, no, there's corruption. It's happening. Here it is. These are the people. This is the event. This is what's going on. You should know. It just takes one brave soul to really change things. So I would never underestimate the ability of a single person to make tremendous change. I am hopeful. I'm skeptical, though, because there are so many things going on that I think we as human beings, as citizens of insane countries, have a desire and a right to know about. And over time, I think we're going to see more of that. We'll see.
Yeah.
And, and then those people are running a parallel government. It's a parallel command structure. And that's a huge problem.
And it was essentially completely in control for 4 years.
Probably for more than 4.
But for the last 4, for sure.
1,000%.
That's the best example we've ever had of that.
1,000%.
That guy's never really running things.
1,000%.
There's no way they let him.
And it's probably still in control to a certain degree now, because it's very hard to, when you have something like that happening, it is very difficult to completely shut it down.
Well, it's
very hard.
Well, here's a perfect example that we know it's definitely running things, because Trump is still trying to figure out why he got shot. He was like, I want more information.
Yeah.
Like there's no information
There's
coming
not
to him.
There's not going to be information.
Yeah,
There's not going to be information.
That's a crazy story. That
also,
story,
there's
you should try to connect, like if it's not America that did it, if it's not us, it's not intelligence agencies that did it, then it means a foreign government that hijacked this kid's brain and got him to climb on top of that roof. Like somebody tried to get someone to assassinate a guy who's running for president, and no one seems to be interested in finding who that person or that group who influenced this kid is.
So many of these ex-intelligence chiefs pop up all over the world. They pop up in Dubai. They pop up on MSNBC.
They like to travel.
They love traveling. They're having meetings with people. They're all over the place.
They love people.
And they love people. They love cultures. They love meeting different cultures.
Yeah, the food's great.
And supposedly I heard from someone who's, again, smart and I consider trustworthy, that there's actually large sectors of the global economy that are moved more in this direction than you'd think. Like there are tentacles into very large investment banks and private equity companies that a lot of these guys have. Let's put it that way. Obviously, it's not a shocking thing.
Why would the government let a private equity company operate with impunity?
Right. So you
especially if they're controlling regulations and they're like, let's work together.
Right. There doesn't seem to be a good answer to any of this. That becomes the real issue.
You ever get invited to these like fucking Illuminati conferences or any of these crazy things?
No, they wanted me to do stand-up at one conference, and it wasn't like an Illuminati kind. It was like I don't know, it was like some type of like low-grade Illuminati.
Yeah,
like
that's how
kind
they start
of faux
you.
Illuminati.
It's like the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And then eventually you go to some weird ranch in the mountains of Wyoming.
Well, that sounds nice. Maybe. Actually, it does sound nice.
Maybe.
No, I think that it does seem weird that a lot of, once you get to a certain level, people take an interest in you that never were interested. Mm-hmm. You know? For sure.
Yeah.
People are interested.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. It is strange that people seem to care about you or what you're saying, or people going, I think your read on that is wrong. And you're like, why do you care what it is? I'm a fucking guy with a talking to a microphone once or twice a week.
Yeah, they don't like that. They don't like people having influence that haven't been sanctioned.
They don't like that.
Yeah, they want all influence to be top down, all influence to be a part of a giant corporation.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They don't want influence to be just regular people. Regular people are fringe. They're far this or far that. They're problematic. They spew misinformation and
Yep, the good old deep state. Basically using corporations and governments as their puppets to bring about whatever dark, twisted fantasy that they want to see manifest on planet Earth. I think it's satanic. I'll get into that in another video. It's always amazing to me how conspiracy, just the term, has become so twisted and manipulated over time that that word, if being used to accuse somebody, is meant to just shut down discussion and say they're insane. And it's working for some people. But conspiracies exist, obviously. It's just two or more people in a room together, and they are coming up with a plan that benefits them, and usually to the detriment of other people. That's what we mean by conspiracy. It happens all the time. And I think we have a right to ask questions and not be denigrated for asking questions at all. That's what a free, open society should be able to do. And the idea of like some shadowy government, everybody's in this dark, smoky room. No. You just have to get all the incentives aligned, and then people will do it seemingly of their own free will. But they're either just manipulated by more money or more power or, something along those lines. And so the idea that conspiracy, asking questions, is somehow wrong is a great way to control human beings, and it works.
There's a very interesting... The teeth really come out, the gnashing of teeth come out in this country when you question at all the American war machine.
Yes.
And the pageantry of war and the, iconography of the state and of war and of how important it is and how just it always is and how we're always on the right side of it and we're always doing the right thing. And World War II, we 100% were. But there are a lot of other times when we've made grave errors with our military.
Yes.
And I feel like it's not good enough for, you can't just point to World War II, which is, again, we were correct.
Yes.
But I think there is this idea that if it's not an accident there's a million movies made about World War II. Yeah. It's not an accident that there is a lot of pageantry surrounding World War II.
Well, also that the World War II movies have heroes.
Of
whereas
course.
the Vietnam movies are apocalypse.
That's
now.
right.
Everything's complicated and it's all chaos.
So I think that inspires the idea that a military solution is always correct and that the use of force is always the right way to do it, and that coincidentally makes people lots and lots of money and their children never end up fighting those wars.
Oh my God, this is such a bombshell in my opinion. I love it. Honestly, I think the military-industrial complex and the mind control apparatus behind that is actually what's driving this. The idea that war is always the right way to solve a problem. Think about all of our movies, particularly our big-budget superhero movies, even Star Wars to some degree. How, in most cases, does the hero win? By brute force. Almost always. They never resolve it any other way. And so we have been conditioned as primates still. This is our monkey mind at work. We have so much technology, so much information, but we're still being manipulated as if we're just these tribal animals who, once they get into fight or flight, can only really think in a very simple way, which is like, I have to defeat or destroy the thing that is threatening me. And so in my opinion, that is the single greatest trick that the military, the intelligence agencies, propaganda, and the devil have ever pulled on humanity. To think that fighting is the way that we solve problems. It's not. And I loved him for pointing this out.
That seems to be a lot of it. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people with bad motivations that are genuinely anti-Semitic or that genuinely have fascist inclinations. There absolutely are. But I think there needs to be space to criticize the mythologizing of war in general and the justification for endless wars all the time.
Yes.
Like Iran. I hope Trump does not go into Iran.
Yeah.
That seems like a very bad idea.
It also seems like a very bad idea for Iran to get nuclear weapons. That seems bad too.
Yes, but I think there's ways to prevent that without a regime change war. Right. This is what we have to do. This is what Tulsi Gabbard, I think, was very attractive about a lot of what she said during her confirmation hearing. She goes, I understand that there are terrorists out there that are dangerous, but we got to find a way to deal with them without committing troops to stand there in an Islamic country. We've done this.
Yeah.
We saw this movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we have to stop thinking that it's going to be better this time. If we decapitate the head of a foreign government and we have American soldiers in an Islamic country trying to set up a provisional government, the nightmare of that during Iraq, Paul Bremer, this weird British-looking guy that they sent to stand on that rubble with his boots and, you know, the mission accomplished on the aircraft carrier. Like, it brings back, like, you know, to me, it's like I get flashbacks from it.
I swear, it's like we're caught in this loop, this ideological and mental loop. That like these things happen over and over and over. There's always war, there's always conflict, but it's never, the people don't want that. The people who belong to a country, they don't really have any interest in going to war with people in another country. It's always the governments. The governments are these perverse entities who are in control, who are like hungry ghosts. There's never enough power, never enough resources for their aim. They have no way of creatively solving problems. And so people are just along for the ride. Like, what the hell are you doing? We don't want to go to war. We don't want this at all. But this machinery, and now it's tied into our economy, like there's always a need for more profits. And so it just seems like it's going on and on and on. And I know we want to break this cycle, but first we have to become aware of it, and then we have to talk about it, and then we actually have to enact change. We actually have to do things to make that happen. That's the hard part. So I think we're stuck on talking about it and identifying it, but at least Tim is pointing this out. We've got to stop the cycle of just constantly doing it, or else it's going to lead to World War III and some stupid ending to humanity and civilization.
People don't trust the government, nor should they, but I don't know if they trust these tech guys either.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. Look what's going on with OpenAI.
That's the whole thing. I think that people are wary of the tech people because these were the same people that were censoring and kicking people off the internet when the people in the White House were blue.
Right.
And now that the people in the White House are red, it's swung back the other way.
Exactly.
So I think people are a little wary of that.
Yeah.
They don't know where that goes.
It's just power. It's just, I mean, like Bernie Sanders is right in that you should be scared of oligarchs, and oligarchs shouldn't be running our government. He's right in that regard.
Right.
And when people get into positions of just unchecked power, so let's say if someone had control of some tech company, let's say it's an AI company, and that AI company literally creates the unstoppable AI that helps empower the entire country. And this one guy is in control of it, and he's worth $3 trillion now.
Right.
And he decides to lobby and change a bunch of laws and influence politicians, and his company starts donating to certain politics. You could change the fabric of society with enough money and enough power and enough influence.
Yeah.
Especially if you could completely control what the narrative is.
Right.
In terms of like when people Google things, when they search things, when they talk about things, you can completely control what they're allowed to talk about and how that narrative gets countered instantly with facts and bullshit. And you can just...
Well, it's being done everywhere, right? So it's being done at the highest levels. And I think people are uncomfortable with just losing, even though a lot of them realize that we didn't have a ton of control, they feel like, I think when you head into the world of tech where people just don't even know where this goes, where does it go? Does it go to transhumanism? Does it go to like AI replacing everybody? And then at what point, what do you do with those people that AI replaced? Do you give them all a cryptocurrency that's linked to their biological whatever? I've heard all these ideas, right? Like, how do you deal with driverless cars where if the entire road is automated? How do you deal with that? I think that fills people with an anxiety where they go, what is the plan? And a lot of these tech guys are like, well, we got to get off the planet. And I think people start going like, wait a minute, you know, like
that's Weinstein, Eric Weinstein.
Well, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
Like, I'm staying. I don't know what you're saying.
There's a lot of people.
There's no air on Mars. Like, let's not go there.
Yeah, well, for sure.
There we go. Again, we should not be trusting people with immense amounts of power, but also a strange post-humanist ideology where they think that, you know, human beings are just cogs in a machine, are machines themselves, that there's nothing magical about us, and that consciousness can be recreated in a machine body. That's just conjecture. I know I'm jumping ahead. This is actually tying to the very nonsensical part at the end where Joe gets onto his transhumanism rant. But I'm so thankful for Tim pointing this out. People at the heads of tech they don't have an amazing vision. Their vision is just to recreate reality, but they're going to be the ones who are going to charge you for it. They're going to create the technology, whether it's the Neuralink that plugs into your brain, or the Meta glasses, or Vision Pro, reality altering goggles or implants in our eyes, whatever it looks like, whatever kind of tech they develop is what's driving them. They simply want to sell that so that they make more money and that they also have more power, and then they can create reality in their kind of weird, poor sci-fi author way, in their direction for this like utopia, this techno-utopian BS, when they don't even have real relationships with real people. That would be my guess. And so anyway, it's really creepy. This is where the whole reptilian concept comes in that they're thinking in very simplistic, survival-based ways. And again, Tim nails it. He points out, where is this going? Where is this leading? And we really haven't seen a very well fleshed out vision for the future. They're kind of just like hitting us with generic talking points of like, oh, once you get AI implanted in your head, then you can be incredibly efficient and do so much more than you ever could. But they don't really go far and beyond what that might look like. The closest that we get to seeing what it might look like is in our entertainment, The Matrix being one of the biggest examples, but there's plenty of other dystopian concepts that we're being subjected to. It's part of predictive programming. It's like, hey, this is what we want to do. And it's seeding our subconscious to make this happen. But that's a whole other video for another day. But this idea that we're being led down this path, being told it's going to be rosy and everything's going to be great, when in fact it would look like transhumanism. It would look like people being completely subjugated by technology to the point where we would be manipulated without even knowing it. This is what David Icke talks about, but that's some far out stuff. Again, for another video. Thank you very much, Tim, for pointing this out. And Joe, you gotta stop swallowing this technological pill. In this segment, he kind of pushed back against it, but in the last segment, he actually goes full circle and just regurgitates the same nonsense before that, oh, it's going to be great, or maybe not, but whatever, it's going to happen. That's what he says, and I disagree, but let's continue.
Do you think weed's going to be federally legal?
If I had to guess, not during this administration.
Yeah.
No, I don't think. I think.
No, it feels like a lot of the, like the experimental harm reduction policies in places like Portland are going the other way.
Well, they went a little crazy in a place that was already crazy.
Yeah, they had a woman driving around shooting people up called the stabbing wagon, and she was like, if somebody needed a fix, she'd like pull up and give them clean needles and stuff.
Is it really called the stabbing wagon?
It was called the stabbing wagon, and yeah, because you're stabbing. And if you're just tweeting.
No, I live in Portland, and I am not aware of the stabbing wagon, but I am aware of how bad things have gotten. It's, again, this kind of like Pollyanna-like thinking where, oh, let's just legalize everything and decriminalize everything, and that way not that many people will go to jail, and they'll be incentivized to do drugs cleanly, and it'll all work out well. No, drugs are dementing. And the Pacific Northwest, with not that much light, there's depression, there's all sorts of psychological issues in the state. Making drugs legal, or at least decriminalizing them, was not the way to go. And it's true, they totally reversed that. But man, the damage was pretty disgusting. I hope they're cleaning it up. I don't go down to downtown anymore. It's becoming a zombie apocalypse everywhere. The cities are falling apart. I want to move to the country. You want to move to the country? Let's move to the country.
No, this is like a way to help.
Oh, Portland.
This was a way to help people.
Oh, Portland.
And people would
so
just be chilling and like, hey, I need a couple of clean needles. So this woman would just show up. There'd be like a bunch of junkies hanging out. She'd show up. She'd hop out of the stabbing wagon with a bunch of clean needles, hand them out. People are like, fuck yeah, good to see you.
Oh, my God.
And she's like, fuck yeah, hope you're all doing good. And they're like, well, you know how it is.
Oh, my God.
And the problem was that didn't work.
Not only did it not work, it encouraged people to move there to shoot up.
Yeah, actually, that's true. So people started moving there because they're like, this is actually a pretty good deal. They don't care if you live on the street. And there's this bitch in a van that shows up with clean needles.
And they give you money.
Yeah, and whatever you need.
They give you free money and food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here it is, the stabbing wagon.
Stabbing wagon. Harm reduction. No, I mean, it's real.
She only has 4,000 followers. That's fucked. Hit that follow, Jamie. Hit a little follow on her.
There you go. Look at the there's a stabbing wagon.
Well, at least she's healthy. She got
It's the
great hair,
stabbing
too.
wagon.
Okay, makes
so
sense.
at the end of the day, it's like that.
Jesus
That
Christ.
seems like a good way to combat drug use is to have a van of drugs.
That van got a $1.5 million grant. Did you see
Yeah.
that? Did you see that in the previous
Of
article?
course.
$1.5 million grant.
Well, because they're trying to help people.
get high.
They're trying to help people get high in a safe way.
Bro, where she parked that van? That's what I need to know.
I mean, it's a good question. She probably lived in the burbs and then came in and then did what she needed to
Doesn't
do.
look like a burbs lady.
Well, that's a good point. Well, you know those weird those Pacific Northwest suburbs. A lot of them aren't my burbs. The
They're
ones that
very-
I like.
Very odd. Those
Yeah.
people are.
It's
they're-
different.
They're like people that live outside of Chernobyl.
Yeah,
Like, they're forever changed.
It's different. There's not a lot of sun up there. Something's going on.
Bad DNA
So
damage.
what was funny is like there's a big article where they were like, yeah, this is actually like what's crazy is like you read about those cities, right? Like Portland or San Francisco, they'll do the craziest thing ever, and then like 2 years later they'll start going like, yeah, this just is not having the results that we thought it would have. Like drug use is up, crime is up, violence is up. So Santa Monica now is doing a curfew because there's been violent crimes at night.
No way.
They're thinking about doing a curfew in Santa Monica. So again, because Santa Monica's thinking about doing a curfew because there's like violent crime. So instead of just going like, hey, we got to throw these people in jail, they're like, it's 9 o'clock, go home. This is California. This is the biggest economy in our country, and they're thinking of having a curfew because they're all out of ideas on how to like stop people from like being victims of violent crime.
God, so living in Portland, it's ridiculous what they try to do. They try to put the horse before the cart or whatever. Their order for their solution was reversed. It was not well thought out. They missed some key steps. So they legalized or decriminalized hard drugs, I believe all drugs. But what they failed to do was create treatment centers. So people are just strung out on the streets doing drugs high as hell. The number of needles found on the streets skyrocketed. I forget the exact numbers. It went from like thousands to hundreds of thousands. Probably because of this damn stabbing wagon. But seriously, it was like a nice idea. Somebody probably went to like Norway or Amsterdam, wherever, they have a really well set up system to deal with people who do drugs and to try to help them. But they missed some steps. Treatment centers, job programs, giving them proper psychiatric help, giving them support. I mean, there's all sorts of things that they needed to do to make this work, but they did none of them. They just passed a law making it legal or, again, decriminalized to do hard drugs. The level of thinking is so bad that you almost have to look at it like there's some grander conspiracy going on. I don't know. I would chalk it up to incompetence, but it's annoying and it's really disappointing.
When you don your tinfoil hat and Velcro the chin strap, do you think that this is a grand plan to destroy civilization?
I think what you have, I don't know if it's a grand plan, but I think what you have is you have two things that are happening simultaneously. You have the people, the last people that seem to want to be in politics are people that believe in like nothing. They're like empty suit, Gavin Newsom types who just really don't seem, they just, whatever room they're in.
Wait a minute, have you seen his podcast?
Yeah, well, that proves my point. That proves my point now, right?
He's a believer.
So now he's like, oh, things are going right, I'll go to the right. Things are going to the left, I'll go to the left. So you have like these people that just don't, they will not, like a Sanders or Trump, whatever you think about them, they're not going to like, quote, stand on business. They're not going to tell people, here's where I'm at. This is the way I feel. They're just empty vessels. And then at the same time you have that happening, you have the craziest people in the world that somehow have gotten hold of a ton of money and a ton of influence on social media. And those empty suit politicians are like scared of these lunatics that believe the craziest things you've ever heard. So these politicians are just like taking edicts from these crazy people online who tell them that we need the stabbing wagon and we need all this stuff. I don't know how that happened. That somebody should look at that, how that happened and study it. And I think it's a lot of these politicians are deeply corrupt. And I think they're terribly afraid of whatever corruption they're involved with coming to the surface. And it could be personal in their personal life. It could be with the state. I think, the mismanagement of money, of resources, all of that stuff. So if I was a really corrupt politician, I would just do the craziest left-wing shit so that I could never be accused of anything.
Good move.
And I would just let them do whatever the hell they want. I go, yeah, well, fucking whatever. What? We got a new law that says they got to draw blood in your house from you before you can defend yourself.
Amen again, Tim. I mean, empty vessels, absolutely right. Hungry ghosts, That's a Buddhist term for like just never. It's never enough. If it's not money they want power. If it's not power they want attention and fame and people to just love them, or it's just narcissism. At any rate, I mean, he's totally right. The people who are getting in power are the people who are excellent at running campaigns and winning. They're charismatic enough. Now, I'm not saying this about all politicians. I know that there are some who are genuinely concerned and actually want to steer things in the right direction. But ultimately, I don't think that this form of government is working because the people who have the capacity to solve problems, they don't want to actually go through the circus and then get to those positions just to make change. And that's why I believe in some sort of bottom-up, organic, not revolution, but just a change of how we do things. And it's not going to come through our elected representatives, barring some sort of amazing miracle that involves people like waking up and there being some sort of peaceful, loving, and highly intellectual revolution. But at any rate, he's totally right. The people who are in power are the last people that we want in power. And I know. I listen to Jordan Peterson. He would argue against that. They're highly competent people, and they are. You have to be highly competent if you're an attorney or if you're a doctor or if you run a company. I understand that. I agree with that to some degree. But what is their vision? What is their North Star? What do they really want to do for ordinary, everyday people, citizens in countries to make their lives better? I think the whole system of economics and politics have just become so intertwined that it's next to impossible to change from within. But at any rate, like Tim's right. He's totally right. And another thing I'll say is that I think the country is just too big. I think countries in general are just too big for a top-down method of solving problems. It's like there's 330 plus million people in the United States alone. There's, 1 billion in China, 1 billion in India and Africa. And it's just too many people to guide, to steer, too many problems that have erupted over the last several decades and is only going to escalate. It's not even that there's too many people. I'm not advocating for, population reduction so that it's easier to solve these problems. I'm just saying that the scope and the scale of problems that are facing government are too vast and complex, even with AI, for human beings to solve. I just don't think we're capable of doing this. But I could be wrong, and I want to be wrong.
It says something about that group of people that used to run everything. They have a dearth of purpose in their life. Right. They're kind of aimless and they float around. I don't mean specifically, rich comedian kids. I just mean like that ruling class. What are they doing now? They don't really have a purpose. They kind of float around. They try to this new age spirituality bullshit. They travel all over the place. You look at any of these rich kids' Instagrams, all they're doing is traveling. It's all the same shit. Right. Go to Anguilla, right. Go here, go there. There's no purpose. I think they don't feel like America's has a defining mission. Like if you look at families like the Kennedys, the Bushes, whatever, you think about those families, they served in the military. They believe that there was some type of arc of history that they were a part of. I feel like a lot of rich people now just kind of don't believe in much of anything. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, they're bored. They start a fake company.
Well, if your whole focus is just making more money,
yeah,
how much time can you spend believing in things?
Right.
That's going to take away from your ability to earn.
Yeah. I think that's one of the big problems now. And that's why I think you saw like a lot of like people get crazy on the left and they started instituting like all these like weird virtue, these purity tests and stuff like that. Is I think they feel a lack of meaning. They wanted to give them, a lot of them wanted to self-flagellation and they wanted the tenets of religion. They wanted meaning. They just don't have it.
Exactly.
So I think that's what happens.
Yeah, I get that. That's totally right. There's a meaning crisis in the country and in the world. Like, what are we doing? We keep praising the advent of technology, but we're just becoming more and more empty and we don't really have meaning that is deep and satisfying, mostly because we're so separated from one another. So this notion that not only is there are things breaking down, but they've never really worked in the first place is true. And so as scary as things might become in the near future when things become more and more chaotic, I think it's ultimately what is needed. I mean, I hate to quote the Economic Forum and the idea of a great reset. They mean it for demonic purposes. I'm saying, and many people are saying that, like, no, the world and the way it works and doesn't work needs to change. And so, yeah, I think people are just very unsatisfied with the way things operate. And so, yeah, I think the future is ripe for change. What it will look like exactly, who the hell knows?
Well, we're getting to a point where the world is really scary, but also equally unbelievable and absurd. So you have it's funny, but it's also insane. And I think people are like, we don't know what's real anymore. These AI videos come out, and you don't know what's real and what's not. The deep fakes are getting better.
Right.
That seems to be one of the biggest problems that no one talks about. Is like reality seems to be splintering.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, reality splintering, and then AI is about to take over our lives, and we're openly cheering it.
Right.
And the world will never be the same again once it does. And we're welcoming it.
Ironically, I think comedians seem to be somewhat in the safer group of people.
In what way? Oh,
In
as
the
far
sense,
as our jobs
yeah,
being
in the
taken
sense
away?
that like
Yeah.
perspective seems like maybe one of the harder things for AI to grasp.
Well,
at
it's
this
also
moment.
live performance is the last human stand.
Right.
You know, where you could go and see something. You go see a guy actually play a guitar. You know, that's so much different, and that's a real human experience. Live sporting events. You know, like real things that are real. You know, that's going to be the hardest to be replaced by AI.
You mean like being a human, like being in the real world, like we always have been? I mean, again, this is part of Joe's derangement, this fascination he has with AI and technology, and the idea of like Robert Kurzweil, who thinks that we're going to sort of like upload our consciousness into the cloud and live in a virtual reality. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. It's just this nonsensical take in that he's saying it'll be hard for AI to replicate real life. Like, that's what being human is. We are these entities that have five senses and this world, which basically we're plugged into. And that's it. That's it. We're only having this conversation because of AI, but even before that, it was like cell phones and the internet. Those sorts of things took us away from interacting with one another and with reacting in the real world. So here we are, we're communicating or listening to one another through the internet, and that's an amazing technological advancement. But again, this idea that like we're going to evolve into a world that is totally virtual, it's nonsensical. It's possible, I'll give it that, but people are going to rebel. It's why would you want to be hooked up to machines living in a world that doesn't exist? It doesn't make any sense to the evolution of human beings. So Joe, I cannot stand it when you go down this road, but whatever, I respect it.
And they're confused about why when any disruption happens, and it's clearly the result of bringing in large numbers of people who are not familiar with the laws of the country, the culture of the country. When anything happens and they bring it up, they're again called a racist or an extremist, or they're arrested. So it's and then who's doing it, right? So you have the people like the people clearly that are in the government and these incredibly wealthy business interests that want people to work for a lot less money, and they want to destroy people's social bonds because I think they really do want people to eventually just accept this kind of totalitarian surveillance state.
Yeah, just give up.
And the way to get them there is by breaking the spirit of these countries, by destroying any social bonds that people have, and destroying any economic power, and destroying their belief in the democratic process. And if they can do that and they can break people, they can get them to do anything they want.
Do you think they're doing this in preparation for AI?
I think they're doing it in preparation for not only technological advancements, I think they're doing it in preparation for world wars. I think they are doing it in preparation for a lot of things.
If AI does become the governing factor of the world, which it probably will, it doesn't really make sense that you let humans with all their corruption and emotions govern things when you can let super intelligence.
Yeah, but who's making that intelligence? That becomes the problem.
Exactly.
Thank you. Again, Tim, trying to point out to Joe some of his ideas are not that well fleshed out. Joe thinks that like AI is going to be this god, that AI is going to be this entity that maybe becomes embodied in a robot and just tells us what to do, and everything is totally logical and makes sense and works. And that, I think, is where his head is at, Joe. And I think he's just like fantasizing like, oh, technology will be better. Why? Because his buddies, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, or people who he's had on the podcast, have told him that, like, oh yeah, these are going to solve our problems. And so I think Joe's just buying into this, but it's nonsensical because, like, who's behind it? What are their ambitions? What are their goals? And it's post-humanism, and it's anti-humanism. And the fact that Joe doesn't see this ticks me off, but Tim is trying to poke him to say, hey, I don't know about that.
What started to happen, though, is there was a decision made that the world was going to kind of be a borderless place where countries were interchangeable and that nation states mattered a lot less than the financial architecture of global capital and where it could go.
And you need a world government.
And you need a government that is a world government, or the closest
world order.
The closest thing you can get to it, which is having an EU, right?
Right.
And then having a government between the UK and the US that's pretty on the same page about everything. And then you have Israel and the Middle East. And then you have, all of these, disparate areas that we kind of control through economic means or military means and stuff like that. And then you have outliers. You have China, Iran, Russia, whatever, people that haven't gotten the memo for whatever reason. I don't want to live in any of those places. That's the argument. They'll go, well, do you want to live in? Shut up. What are we, idiots? I don't want to live in any of those places, but they didn't get the memo. So, and then in all of these countries, by the way, in Europe, in America, not so much Israel, they don't love the immigration, as we can see. They're kind of big on the borders, Israel. They like the borders. But in America and Europe and Scandinavia and all these countries, the populations were just told to accept massively high levels of immigration over a very short period of time. That's odd. That doesn't make any sense. And if you point that out, you're called a racist and extremist. And that's a very strange thing. What are you doing with all these people? You can't. The Biden administration brought in 10 million people over 4 years. What are they here for? There's not enough jobs for the people that are here. We have vast chasms of wealth inequality. We have AI coming. We have automation coming. Why would you bring in all of these people? What are you trying to do?
What do you think they're trying to do?
I think that exactly what I said. I think they need bodies. I think they need cannon fodder. I think they need to break the idea of any social bonds that exist between people. Listen. And
they need a little chaos.
They need a little chaos. I think you bring
more laws.
Yeah, you bring in people, more surveillance, more dependence on the government. Yeah. You get people out of the idea. They got people out of the idea years ago that it's very hard to have your own business now. They've pretty much extinguished that in people's heads, even though there are people that still do it. Now I think they're going to start to extinguish the idea that you can have a home, that you can own property, that you could drive a car, that you can do all of these things. They're going to extinguish that idea, and they're going to do that because why not control everybody?
Man, Tim went deep and dark, and that's I don't totally buy or agree with what he's saying. As far as the elites, this Illuminati, the World Economic Forum, yeah, they've actually kind of laid it out that that's what they want. They want to just control everything from the top down, get rid of everybody's wealth or means of generating wealth, their property, cars, things like that. I think that at first glance, when you listen to that, it sounds preposterous, insane, like it's not even possible. However, I think that if you look at it with a long enough time scale, a long enough time horizon, that these things are possible. It will take generations for people to basically get squeezed out of home ownership. I mean, there's people who've owned their property for generations. So it's not going to happen like the flip of a switch. People in this country and all over the world, they own their homes, they own their property, they own businesses. And so those things are going to be incredibly difficult to squeeze out of existence. And they won't completely go by the wayside. They'll always be there, and people will always have some level of control over what they do in their life. I don't believe that there's this totalitarian, from the top down, prison planet concept where you can't move an inch without the overlord saying so. However, he is spelling out a pretty dismal and bleak future. They just want more power. And so they're going to go with whatever means might get them that. Even if it means devastating economies or countries or borders and creating chaos, that's all in the service of their end goal, which is more power for them. And so I didn't really like this segment at all, but it's definitely something to address. And, he's not wrong to steer down this dark conspiratorial rabbit hole.
There is an argument to be made that level of devastation and death is worse than you talking to someone on your podcast.
Allegedly.
There is an argument to be made. It's probably not a good one.
The amount
but there
of damage
is an
you
argument.
Can do with just talking.
There is an argument to be made that, starvation and stuff like that and people dying is worse than a podcast.
But wait a minute.
I wouldn't
Wait
make
a minute
it.
before you say that. Have you been there?
Right, that's a good point.
You haven't been?
By the way, how is he in all these wars? Can I just go to wars? By the way, how are you allowed to just go to wars? Is that the way
you should at least
can you just
have the
go
courtesy of going there.
Can I just go to wars, or do I have to come back and say what people want me to say about the wars? Can I go to the wars and have my own opinions, or do I have to have the opinions?
Not if you want to go back.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting, this war tourism. How do I get on this war tourism?
Yeah.
I'd like to go to the Ukraine. I want to go. I want to go. I want to go to all this war tourism.
Do you have any awards that they can melt down and make bullets out of?
Joe, think about this. Do I seem like a guy that has a lot of awards?
Didn't you get one of those YouTube plaques when you hit 100,000?
I don't even know where they send it. I don't know where they're sending those YouTube plaques.
We've got a few of those.
But I like this idea of war tourism. I like the idea of going to a war and then coming back having a very black and white view.
Yes, I've been there.
I get it, and I know, and interesting. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I love that.
You feel better than the other people.
Well, of course, there's a lot of people. It gets very murky. Most people I know that have been to war have a very murky, complex view of things. But it is good to go to a war and then come back and be as sure as you were before you came.
So for Joe to go after Douglas Murray after the debate with Dave Smith just a few days afterwards is pretty rich. I love that. But yeah, it was a pretty bad showing by Doug Murray. That's super disturbing. How can you have such a black and white view when so many people are being indiscriminately killed? It seems indiscriminately killed. And you call yourself a journalist, but it ends up that you're actually just spewing a nation's propaganda. So you're just a tool. That's not a journalist. But I get it. I get how people have their perspectives based on their previous allegiances and alliances. I understand it. It's one of the downsides of humans is having a particular perspective and then not challenging your own perspective. But that was a really bad debate. And man, Douglas Murray got trashed.
You know, has there been any theorizing as to like what the end game is, or is it just a curiosity for them?
I think the end game is artificial intelligence.
Right.
Because that's what we're really making.
Yeah.
The one big thing that's going to change the world way more than any other technology is artificial intelligence.
Right.
Especially when it's attached to quantum computing. So if you have human beings that have constantly searching, constantly traveling, they're roamers, they want new resources, new things, they want new innovation, and all these new innovations have allowed them to succeed over their rivals, and then they continue this trend technologically, and then they acquire great wealth and power and all these. Well, what are they doing? They're making better technology. Well, ultimately, what does that mean? Ultimately means they make a better life form, and maybe that's what we do. Maybe we're just making a cocoon.
We're just here trying to make the best version of AI.
Right, and that's probably what the whole universe is filled with. All biological life eventually probably gets to a point where if it's intelligent enough, it starts making synthetic life.
And then once you have synthetic life, what then becomes the point?
That's the good question. Synthetic life might be God.
So this segment, I just can't deal with it. I just can't deal with Joe and his AI authoritarianism, his belief that like AI emerging as the dominant life form on the planet, getting rid of humans and having that be like a good thing in any way. I don't know where his brain's at, but it's actually quite disturbing because I like the guy. I think he's had this implanted in him, this concept seeded into his brain, and then it's like grown and evolved and twisted him in a very anti-human kind of way. It ticks me off. I can't listen to it. Otherwise, you can check out my take on it in this particular video I think it's here. And it just, it's my ranting on how annoyed I am by Joe and his perspective on this issue. But at any rate, I appreciate the watch. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
That might be how the universe got made in the first place. It might be what came first, the chicken or the egg.
So once we get there,
it's not even we anymore. It's
right.
It. Once it is born, and once it has.
So is that a way for God to keep replicating itself?
Well, it might.
I mean,
it might be how Jesus comes back. You know, like this. A lot of these stories, these biblical stories, you have to say, like, what were they saying? What were they trying to say? Like, what was the real event that they were recording? If they passed these stories down, they're so significant for thousands of years, like over 1,000 years of just oral history, and then thousands of years of written language. Like, what are they trying to say? You know, and what is this omnipotent force that controls everything in the universe? and that it wants us to follow certain rules and obey, and it wants us to love it and cherish it. And if you do, you genuinely seem to have a better life. Like people that like legitimately follow Christianity, they seem legitimately happier. So it gives you an incentive to follow it. And then you continue to keep society rolling to the point where this happens. And I think it happens inside of our lifetime. I'm sure of it if we don't blow ourselves up.
And then we get to this point, and
we're irrelevant.
It's interesting. I totally get it. But then once we get to the point of irrelevance, and now we have AI that becomes God, then what does God do?
Turns us into dodo birds. We're gone.
We're out.
Yeah, I think we stop breeding anyway. It's probably they don't even have to destroy us. Our endocrine systems are all getting destroyed slowly. We're well aware of that. So because of technology, we were able to invent plastics. Because of plastics are slowly destroying our endocrine system because of the ubiquitous use of vaccines and all these aluminums and mercuries and heavy metals and then herbicides and pesticides and pollutants. Our bodies are getting slowly weakened. And our endocrine systems are getting less and less viable. There's more miscarriages than ever. There's less people are giving birth than ever. Sperm counts are lower than ever. It's like moving, and then we're all obsessed with changing genders, right? So we're all obsessed with being non-binary and this and that, and we're slowly moving away from biological imperative breeding. Right, and then you have in vitro fertilization, and then you have artificial wombs, and then you have life that they're creating literally in a laboratory, unique forms of life. And then you have artificial intelligence to be able to do that whenever it wants to. And then you're going to get to the point where when it becomes viable, human beings have already entered into population collapse. And then you bring them robot sex dolls, and then you just jerk them off while they have VR headsets on. And no more kids.
And then AI eventually says, fuck it, let's get rid of these containers.
They don't have to get rid of them. They don't even have to get rid of them. They just exist.
We'll just die out.
With full power.
So then you have these AI machines.
We'll be like those fucking people in the Amazon that are shooting bows and arrows at helicopters.
Yeah,
we'll still exist.
Well, these AI machines just running the entire world.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way to stop it.
And then we're just running around.
For sure, that's what China's preparing for.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, they're developing factories that are bigger than San Francisco. See, that they have an EV factory that's larger than San Francisco.
Who's going to drive the EVs?
They are.
People, for a little bit.
Yeah, for a little bit. But it's also to fuel consumerism,
of course,
which fuels innovation, which fuels
everything.
The birth of this.
And this is what a lot of these people that have looked into this have theorized that this is. So it's funny because it is just a parallel reality that we're not plugged into.
It's also, I always say this: if you were from another planet and you looked at us, like, what is this one apex species doing? Well, it's making better stuff.
Right.
The number one thing it does, above everything, above war and murder and all the crime, the number one thing it does is make better stuff. That's what it produces. Constantly, consistently better stuff. Never happy with what it has. And it does it at a staggering rate. Where it's like, it's even a question that your phone from my iPhone 11 from a few years back is like, is that still good? Like, it's a question of whether or not so. For 5 years, that's crazy. If you have a gun from 5 years ago, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong. You don't need a new gun.
Right.
It's the same technology. Imagine a factory larger than San Francisco. It's happening in China's BYD's Zhengzhou branch, which will be 10 times larger than Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada. Crazy stuff, dude. It's crazy. It's going to be a factory that's bigger than an American
It's a really
city.
interesting time to be alive.
It's great.
But,
I don't think anybody knows what the final chapter of this book is going to be. I don't think anybody. I don't think these people that are like accelerating towards this technological supremacy.
And all the people that are theorizing, they're theorizing.
Yeah. And then do we get visited when that happens? When AI becomes sentient and our job is done, do we then get visited by the Galactic Empire?
I would hate if it all came down to just AI doing stand-up comedy. If they all just decided to do stand-up comedy. What if AI decided to do podcasts and it's just a bunch of hyper, fucking, brilliant machines talking to each other? Maybe that's the way the world just ends, with like artificial intelligence just blabbing.
I don't think the world ends. I think we end.
Right.
And I think that would be a terrifying thought to Australopithecus. If you told Australopithecus, like, one day you're going to be in a self-driving Tesla and you're not going to need your spears. What?
Right.
You'd be terrified. But how am I going to get the buffalo?
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to eat? How am I going to
Right.
feed my children raw meat? You know, you was like, no, you guys are going to have fire.
Right.
You're going to be able to turn on a switch. Instead of, like, rubbing sticks together for half an hour, you're just going to be able to turn on a switch and fire's going to be instantly. You're going to have this thing in your hand. Look at this.
Yeah. Right.
Imagine if I brought this to a cave person. Check it out, bro. You need a fire?
It's crazy.
I'm your huckleberry.
It's crazy.
That's technology.
Right.
You know, you show a cell phone to someone from the 14th century, they burn you at the stake. You're a wizard.
Right.
Yeah, and it's all moving in this very weird direction that no one can predict because it's exponential, because it's so staggering how much technological innovation they have. Just with quantum computing, like I've got someone coming on soon that's going to supposedly explain that to me, but like, what are you even saying?
Right.
It's operating in the multiverse and it's
Right.
accessing infinite universes.
Who explains that type of stuff? Like, is it a scientist?
You have to get someone who's actually working in the field.
Okay.
Because even a regular scientist, they're just going to give you theoretical shit. You got to get someone who's actually working on quantum computing systems and can explain how it works and why it's able to crack calculations that would take. Mark Andreessen said it best. This has already happened. They have taken calculations that if you turn the entire universe, every atom in the universe, into a supercomputer, the universe would die of heat death before it could solve this equation. And these quantum computers that already exist, that we've already done, can solve it in a matter of minutes. And they don't know how it's doing that. And so they think it's doing that by accessing the multiverse. They think it's proof of the multiverse. But again, this is just like the sound of gay guys falling off a roof. It's like so far away.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's like, is that really happening?
Right.
Like, what's going on over there? What are they doing over there?
Right.
It's almost like it's almost abstract. Like, what you hear someone say that they can currently solve equations that, like, is that real?
Right.
Like, when is, like, to you and I, it's like we don't understand the technology at all. We don't understand all the steps that have been put place. All the work that's been done to get the technology to this point. These chips are like the size of this fucking mint tin.
Yeah.
That's how big they are. And then they're
Right.
surrounded by these super cooling units.
Right.
And that's like, it has to be cooled at these insane temperatures, cooler than deep space in order for it to even function.
It's unreal.
It's fucking nuts, dude.
That's
and
crazy.
that's real, and that's happening right now.
So God only knows what's coming.
Yeah, they're already building nuclear reactors just to power AI plants.
Right.
Multiple nuclear reactors just to power AI plants, because the amount of electricity that's going to be required
Is tremendous.
tremendous.
Yeah.
And they're just all on this wild scramble between us and China to try to get there first.
It's such a strange thing that we know it's coming, but we can't. The pace of it is going to be.
And there's no way to figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
like when Wilbur and Orville Wright flew that stupid fucking shitty airplane, who would imagine that 50 years later someone would drop a nuclear bomb out of one of those?
Right.
They didn't have jets back then. They were
Right.
propeller planes, right?
Right.
The Enola Gay, wasn't that a propeller plane?
Yeah. I believe so.
Dropping the most sophisticated of weapons. Yeah. No one knows what's going to happen when a new invention happens and then everyone builds on that invention. No one would have ever imagined hypersonic jets back when Wilbur and Orville were floating around that stupid fucking wooden thing that they invented.
Right.
And so no one understands, like, what's the 50-year quantum computing thing? It's 50 years from making the airplane to dropping a bomb out of it. How many years is it from quantum computer thing to God? How many years is it until this thing starts making better versions of itself to the point where it literally can manipulate everything in the universe at will? It can create new universes.
It's unbelievable to think about. It's almost beyond the grasp of our mind to consider.
It is.
It is fully,
It is.
and it's terrifying.
Think of those stupid cars that people used to drive around in. like
Right.
in 1823. You ever watch that? Or
Yeah, of
1923?
course, of course.
Drive around those stupid cars, and now they have electric cars like a Tesla that can go 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. Like,
Right.
nobody saw
Right.
any of this shit. Waymos. Nobody saw Waymos when they saw
Right.
Model T, but yet they're all here.
Right.
And no one knows where this is going. It's all just speculation and guessing. And I would imagine that even the most creative minds are not going to be able to see where this is going.
No. It's insane.
And we're living through it. And
Yeah.
most people, unlike you and I that like have to talk about shit constantly, most people probably aren't even paying attention.
Yeah. No. Why would you?
Why
It's
would you?
almost pointless.